Hello everyone and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7 Custom Project Set 2. Here is the fourth car of the set, the Lamborghini NOMAD Diablo. This is of course an iconic car in the Gran Turismo series, dating all the way back to Gran Turismo 3, though only in the Japanese version. But it would be seen across all regions in Gran Turismo 5 and 6. This car, like the Castrol Mugen NSX from earlier in the set, is a JGTC car, though this one specifically is from the 2000 series, but its drivers never actually scored a point in the season and were therefore unclassified for the championship. So the car may not have seen major success in the real world, but in Gran Turismo, it's a completely different story. This car has been a fan favourite since its inclusion in GT3, and it was even more popular in Gran Turismo 5 and 6. This car is an incredibly useful car in those games, and it is incredibly fun to use, and really fast for its performance point level. And I believe I've recreated that feel in this build. Like with all these builds, the livery for this car was made by another player in the community, and I've left a link in the description for you to download it and add it to your own libraries. Of course, if you choose to use it, send the original creator of the livery some support from this video, and without further ado, we will head to the tuning shop to fit our custom parts to the car. So, in the tuning shop, we are going to need quite a few parts for this car. This is a full race spec version of the car, so it's going to be a bit more drastic as some of the other builds this series, more comparable to the NSX than the two road cars. But interestingly, not as much extra power as you would think. A lot less weight, but not as much extra power as you may have otherwise thought. So, in the sports section, you're not going to need the sports air filter. I bought it to test it, but you don't actually need it for this build. You will need weight reduction stage 1. The car comes with sports hard tires by default, but you won't need them. In the club sports section, you will need weight reduction stage 2, and the power restrictor, and the ballast. In the semi-racing section, you are going to want the fully customizable LSD, and weight reduction stage 3. And in the racing section, you'll want the racing silencer, you'll want the racing brake pads, you'll want the fully customizable suspension, the racing clutch and flywheel, fully customizable racing transmission, and racing hard tires. Of course, you could go for either medium or soft if you wanted to. I just prefer hard tires for the added durability, but if you wanted to use medium or soft, you could definitely do that. In the extreme section, I have the carbon ceramic brake discs fitted. You could go for the regular ones if you want. I just prefer the look of the carbon discs, so it's entirely up to you. No real difference, just the looks. And in the ultimate section, you will not need anything for this build. So, now that we have everything, let's head back to the garage and we can apply our tuning to this car. Okay, so just before we get into that, I would like to note that the real car is listed as having 574 horsepower, whereas my build has 575. This was as close as I could get to the real world value, but for the sake of one extra horsepower, I thought it would be okay. Also worth noting here is that, like the 430 Scuderia build I did from the same set, originally I copied the stats from Gran Turismo 6 exactly and based the build off that car entirely, but after testing it I didn't like how it felt to drive, because the settings from Gran Turismo 6 didn't translate fully into Gran Turismo 7, like with the physics and everything being different, so like in the 430 Scuderia video, I've included two setting sheets. One is my build and the other is the Gran Turismo 6 version. You can feel free to try both if you want, but I would recommend trying this first version, which is the one I made from scratch, as I think it is the superior option. After I've talked through the entire settings sheet here, I will show you the Gran Turismo 6 version, and you can try it if you want, but this is the build I would recommend. With that being said, for this build, I have the racing hard tires equipped. For suspension, I have 65 on body height for front and rear. This is as low as we can get, and it's as close to the real car as possible, because the real car is lower because it's a race car, not a road car. So there are certain limitations with the road car in terms of the suspension, but this is as close as I can get to the real height of the car. For the anti-roll, I have 5 on front and rear. For the compression on dampers, it is 34 front and rear, with 43 front and rear for the expansion. For natural frequency, I have 2.80 on the front and 3.0 on the rear. For negative camber angle, it is 3.0 on the front and 3.0 on the rear. For the toe angle, we have 0.15 out on the front and 0.25 in on the rear. For our differential, we have 10 for initial torque, 40 for acceleration sensitivity, and 20 for braking sensitivity. Those are all on the rear because the car is rear-wheel drive, so we can only adjust the rear values. For the downforce, it is set to 85 on the front and 205 on the rear. The ECU is untouched in this build. For the ballast, I have put 38 kilos, and I've put that all the way to the front to get closer to a 50-50 weight distribution. Also bring us up to 1200 kilos, which is the real world weight of the car. The power restrictor is set to 98 to get us to 575 horsepower. The transmission It's fully customizable racing, and I've just gone for an automatic tune of 330 kilometers per hour. The Gran Turismo 6 one has a custom gear ratio based on Gran Turismo 6, but it doesn't quite work for reasons I'll get into when I discuss that. For the other parts here, you can see what we fitted. We don't have the sports air filter fitted on this. We have the racing silencer, the carbon discs, the racing brake pads. We have our racing clutch and flywheel, and our 3 weight reductions here. So that's all for my build. I will now show you the Gran Turismo 6 version, and you can try them both out if you want. But like I said, this is definitely the one I would recommend trying first. And then if you don't like it, you can try the Gran Turismo 6 version, see if you like that. And then if you don't like either, then you can adjust them as you see fit. So, the Gran Turismo 6 version of this shares all the same parts, it's just the suspension and transmission that are different. So, the body height remains at 65, the anti-roll is set to 3 front and rear, the compression is 27 front and rear, and the expansion is 36 front and rear. For natural frequency, we have 2.35 on the front and 2.55 on the rear. For negative camber angle, we have 1.5 on the front and 3.5 on the rear. For the toe angle, we have 0.50 towed out on the front and 1.0 towed in on the rear. For the differential settings, those are the same. And for the transmission, it is still 330, but it is manually tuned to the values you see on screen here. This doesn't quite work for this car because the racing car in Gran Turismo 6 has 6 gears instead of 5 gears. So it really doesn't end up working quite well. The top end speed is vastly limited to what the car can actually do. So if you want to try this, you can feel free to, but I really wouldn't recommend it because you don't have the 6th gear, so it really feels limited. But if you want to try it, tune the bottom gear first, in this case the 5th gear. Get the first number before the slash accurate to what I have on here. Move up to the next gear and the next gear. Get them all accurate. Then once you have all the first numbers, your second number won't be accurate. That's when you adjust the final gear. If you set it to the value I have here, the number after the slash will match up with what I have here. So if you want to try it, you can, but I would really not recommend it because it doesn't work without the 6th gear really. And the other parts are the same across both builds. So that's it for both versions. Now what we will do is we will head to the track and see how this car performs. I will only demo this build as I think it is the superior option, but like I said, try the GT6 version if you want, but I really would recommend going with this build as I do think it is the superior option. So, how is this car then? I think it's fantastic. The Diablo, of course, isn't known for being the easiest car in the world to control, but it is a car that I have always thought responds well to tuning, and this build is no exception. I think this build feels really good to drive, but it doesn't do all the work for you. I didn't want it to feel like it did, as that wouldn't really feel realistic to me. However, this build feels vastly better than the stock car does. It is a useful car for the Le Mans money grind event with minimal editing to the build, meaning it can pay for itself in no time, and of course, it's always good when a car is useful for career mode money grinding. Of course, it isn't a perfect replica, the lack of that 6th gear is really noticeable, but I do think this build is a fitting tribute to a legendary car from the past of Gran Turismo. So that will do it for this video. Be sure to let me know what you think of it. Especially let me know if you tried the Gran Turismo 6 version, if you think I'm wrong and you think it is a fantastic controlling car. I wouldn't recommend using it, but if you did like it, please let me know. I would be curious to see what people think about that. Thank you all for watching. Stay tuned in the coming days for the remaining builds in the set, and have a great day.